It's Happy Times and Places, that podcast where that bloke who's on all those soppy Blu-ray documentaries watches Doctor Who and says things about it, but doesn't slag it off. It'll never work.
Hello, I'm K McLachlan, and I have been a fan of Doctor Who since the 30th of November 1963, when I saw the repeat of An Unearthly Child. Now, the story I have chosen is the Dalek Masterplan.
Well, I tend to record these very early in the morning when everyone's gone to bed, so we're about to go to the abandoned planet, and I shall be watching it in the abandoned living room. There's the difference between what it's like watching Doctor Who at home and the scope that Doctor Who aims for. So when you're in the end of the Daleks master plan, I have 2 more episodes to see if I can get close to... I'll tell you what, wouldn't it be nice? Because Ian K McLachlan, a fan from the days of yore, from the olden times, who has watched every single episode of Doctor Who bar episode 7 of Marco Polo. I think I've got 2 things that Ian has got, haven't I? So there's still a chance. Well, do you know what? If I get... Oh, no, it was 2 things. I've got this episode, next episode, and then the bonus thing. So I've got a chance to get 3. And do you know what? If I get another 2, that's 4. That's a third. That's not bad. And if I get 3, that's the same amount of things as there are existing episodes of the Daleks Master Plan. And seeing as the chances of the Daleks Master Plan having existing episodes is quite small, for me to get 3, I think would be an achievement, like a win. I've still got something to aim for in this ludicrously hard competition that I've set up in order to give what is essentially a commentary podcast a sense of jeopardy and plot and competition, where it's really it's a thin disguise for a man waffling and not having to do any research. Anyway, let's crack on. And I have the loose cannon reconstruction of the abandoned planet, and I'm going to press enter, which will hopefully start it playing in 3, 2, 1. Well, it's taking a while to kick in, isn't it? Something here. Gonna play? Oh, there we go. Ah! Well, I'm sorry about that. Well, there we go. That's... you might not be very synced. I'm sorry about that. Well, look, the abandoned planet is, I seem to recall, another Ian, whose fan credentials are pretty spick and span, favourite or most desired missing episode, and that is Ian Levine. Ian Levine would like this episode, I think, more than any to come back. So it'll be interesting to see why that is. I'm presuming because the delegates are in it. He's ordered a bag of delegates and Daleks and Return to the Planet Kemble. So, there's a lot to consume here. And I suppose, because next episode I know doesn't have the delegates because they all shoot off in this one. And yes, it's interesting because I think I may have mentioned in the last episode that we were coming back to Terry Nation, but of course we're not. Dennis Spooner writes these last 2 episodes, and for some reason I'd got it in my head recently. Of course, I knew in the past. It's obvious stuff that Nation writes 1 to 5 and 7, 6 of the episodes, and Spooner writes 6, 8 to 12. They write 6 episodes each, and I knew they'd written half of it each, but that just the alternating thing was a bit of a myth. But as I was doing this, for some reason I was looking forward to these last 2 episodes as being, it's getting back to Terry Nation again. which are actually words I never thought I'd say, because I've always slightly poo-pooed Terry Nation. I think because he does himself no favours of being, even when he's interviewed by Alan Wicker on that programme, they say, how did the Daleks come about, as you're talking to us from your massive mansion? And he goes, yeah, I was doing this thing, it was take the money and fly like a thief. And you go, you don't sort of have to be as dismissive of the thing that made you a millionaire and sort of go, what we sort of now know, that he didn't really make that much effort. But I've had a renewed respect for him since going through the files of the early years of the show, because one of the reasons he doesn't put much effort in is because he doesn't need to, because he knows how to structure and he knows how to fling a script out there that has the right amount of scenes, the right amount of jeopardy, the right amount of pacing, which means the script editor doesn't have to do too much rewriting, and also what he promises in his storyline is what you get in his scripts. So I guess he's like a sort of a George Best or something. He doesn't he's so good he doesn't actually have to bother. But then it makes you go, but what if you had bothered? Just imagine how amazing you could have been. But I do understand that kind of, if I can get away with it, I'll do, I'm not going to compare myself to Terry Nation, but once I realised that I could sort of get away with swatting up on exams on the night before, I never bothered. I'm doing that with my accounts now as well. I give myself enormous amounts of stress the night before, and then go, if I'd actually put some preparation into that, my life would have been easier, the stress would have been less, my accountant would have been happier. But now I leave everything to the last minute, and because I seem to, I don't know, I seem to cope if I sort of scramble it all together. And I guess maybe that was Terry Nation's writing method, that he just sort of went, well, I'll just dash it off, and it will be no better if I spend, a month honing it and preparing it. But there is that nagging doubt, isn't there, going, ugh. But anyway, he didn't write this episode, but he did, I'm guessing that, these last two episodes are the storyline conclusion of his six-parter. But I certainly think this, the stuff around Kemble and with the delegates, and gives this story its unique flavour, more so than the sort of bits in the middle, which are the chase revisited, if you like. And this has a real sense of. We have been a little bit round the houses, but now we're back on Kemble where it all began, and it does feel a bit like, we're getting to the season climax, even though, as I said last week, this is not the end of the season. It's nice that we have all these set photographs, and of course this reconstruction I'm watching was done before we'd got episode 2, so they've done a pretty good job with the delegates, this sort of composite Salation, who seems to be made of tights and chocolate buttons, and not just in the recon, but full stop. But we've only got a very blurry picture of Terence Woodfield playing Salation, and here as Malfa. We also have the Christmas tree guy from Mission to the Unknown, who we know wasn't there now, and Gearan, who's Jack Pitt, is not the sort of grey figure with a sort of covered head to toe in grey swaddling. Is this sort of slightly feminine leather-clad thing that we've got in episode 2? That must be Gearan. I love the tone of voice of the Dalek in this scene. It's really sort of wasp-like and malevolent and biting. That's the Dalek Supreme, isn't it? But it's really sort of edgy and nasty, real like a sort of school bully in the playground. The real arc for Marvick Chen is don't get ideas above your station, and they've given him his head, and he's he's gone off his nut, but that Stoney will have pulled it off nicely. And it's interesting how the writer Spooner has started to favour Salation, who's not even in Mission to the Unknown and doesn't have any lines in in episode 2 and is just a non-speaking supporting artiste, but is now a sort of speaking actor. And Malfa, who's this one here I can see now, who's got the sort of cracked mosaic face, who was Robert Cartland in Mission to the Unknown, was non-speaking in episode 2 and presumably isn't in 3. And now here he is, played by a different actor from Mission to the Unknown and episode 2, and the actor who plays him is an actor whose main claim to fame isn't that I've eaten an apple pie made of apples from his orchard, but that is one of my claims to fame is that I've eaten apples from his orchard. But his main claim to fame, of course, is that he's Alf Roberts in Coronation Street, the mighty Brian Moseley, who is also in this story in episode 7 as Buddy Windrush. So he's one of the few people to have appeared in Doctor Who under 2 different names. There are others, and there are some to disguise their appearance, like Anthony Ainley and Terry Malloy. But I would put them in a slightly different subcategory from Luann Peters / Carol Keyes, who's in Frontier in Space and the Macra Terror with 2 different names. I always wish the actor Trevor Byfield had been in Doctor Who, because he sometimes credited himself as Trevor Byfield and sometimes credited himself as Zig Byfield or Ziggy Byfield. And he was one of those great, wonderful, sort of rough, lived-in character actors, but I think he was in the bill about 946 times, and he never did a Doctor Who, bizarrely. No longer with us now, sadly. So Gearan has been killed. And in our reconstruction, it is the what we assume to be Gearan from Mission to the Unknown, who's the sort of grey one. It's not the most imaginative of all the Mission costumes. But when episode 2 came back, as I say, there was this slightly almost feminine looking leather thing going on. So presumably that's who got zapped by Chen in that scene. And it makes you wonder how that's dealt with back at home, because presumably these delegates are all here plotting the destruction of the universe. They are assembling the greatest war force ever. So presumably it's not just them. You know what I mean? Presumably they've left people at home going, right, we're all going to be in a war. We've got these allies. Don't worry, it's fine. That they're not going to just kill us. So prepare for war. When I come back, the military will do as I tell them. And then they all gather here, and the Daleks sort of turn on them. But this I really do like this element of this, where the Daleks are really cruel to Chen. That they humiliate him. They don't just go, "We're going to chuck you in prison." The Dalek Supreme sort of goes, You stand here and you tell the delegates everything you want to tell them. And he goes, "This is my moment. I shall take centre stage." And then when he's not even looking, they just sort of sneak out the back and then put bars on the room and essentially turn it into a prison cell. Now they could have done a much more direct humiliation, but it's almost like not responding to a troll. You want to sort of go, "I hate you, you're awful," but actually if you just ignore them, they hate it. Now I know the Daleks have come back now and told him what's going on, but the Dalek Supreme, the really spiteful sounding one, just sort of swept off and just went, you do your thing that you think is big, because it's meaningless. You're nothing to us. And in fact, this is an episode of absences, because the Doctor, it's really weird, isn't it? The Doctor, we don't see the Doctor again for this whole episode. And then I think next week we don't see him until quite near the end. And this starts to happen a lot in the Wiles era, and he wasn't in last week much, was he? It took him 10 minutes to appear. Gradually, and he's not in the massacre much at all. And I know he's the Abbot of Amboise, but the Abbot of Amboise is literally only in the recap of episode 2. He's not in the rest of it. So the Abbot actually only really properly appears in episode 3. And the Doctor disappears at the beginning of episode 1, comes back at the end of episode 4, disappears a lot through Celestial Toymaker. So there's a lot of time in this period where Hartnell isn't in it. And it's of great credit to, I think, Peter Purvis, who I think is hugely underrated. I think he's a really good dramatic actor of this kind of fare. He's got the right drive and the right sort of gutsiness to be essentially the de facto hero. And I think because he became a bit of a legend and a household name in Blue Peter, so I got the guy from Blue Peter was in Doctor Who. I think if he hadn't been the Blue Peter guy, we'd be going, this guy's an absolute blooming legend. He is he's the sort of Flash Gordon of Doctor Who. No, because Flash Gordon's cheesy. He's not cheesy at all. I think he's a proper leading man, and I'd like to have seen a bit more of him and Sarah actually together. And I noticed that Sarah is credited now as Sarah, not Sarah Kingdom, which I suppose moves her towards being a companion. I mean, she's a companion, for whatever official billings and things. She's entered our consciousness as a companion, whether the 20th anniversary special and Doctor Who celebration were overambitious or mistaken or what. Same as Katarina. I mean, I'm not going to quibble with anybody. I know some fans who, if you had, the companion Katarina, they'd go, who? You go, Katarina the companion? Well, I know Katarina, but she's not a companion. I don't like having conversations with people like that who willfully misunderstand you in order to make their petty little point about what is real and what isn't, or what is factual and what isn't. But as I say, I think it's fairly tenuous that Katarina is a companion. And again, if you wanted to break it down, I suspect she probably isn't. But I'm not going to interrupt somebody making an interesting point in order to pick them up on that. And in all those listings back in the day, she was. So she is. But yes, it's really eerie, this episode. There's a lot of, as I say, the Daleks disappear from Chen and leave him sort of grandstanding on his own. The Doctor leaves Stephen and Sarah. They're hanging around the city here, and it's unguarded. And it makes you go, well, why aren't the Daleks guarding everywhere? But it means it's the abandoned planet. That's what the whole episode is. It's sort of like we're with the heroes, and the story seems to be going on somewhere else. And that doesn't feel like a shortcoming. That feels almost as if we're powerless to do anything because events have moved beyond us, Stephen and Sarah. They've moved beyond even Mavic Chen, who's left, ranting to his increasingly irrelevant cohorts because the Daleks have what they need now. They don't need those guys. As I say, I don't quite... I feel that the delegates are slightly let down by the Daleks' master plan, and I don't buy the logic of it. I really harp on about going, they're government representatives. Just if you kill one or someone, it doesn't mean that the whole system that you've got to set up has unravelled. So if you needed this war force, and then you just go, well, we don't need you anymore. Well, why were they assembled in the? I'm not quite sure why they were assembled in the first place, and what they're supposed to do now. And it's a shame because so much was promised by that lovely array. A Mission to the Unknown is basically going, you're going to meet loads of really interesting aliens, and they're going to do loads of things. So the costumes were made, the actors were cast, the plot was set up for that, and then it just sort of went, I don't think we'll actually do that much with them, and we'll kill a couple of them, which makes a mockery of. Anyway. I've talked about that, and it's just because I love them so. It's a bit that does overshadow the rest of the otherwise brilliant denouement of this epic tale. I could have just done with more delegates and less Egypt. Is that fair? I think that's fair. And certainly less guff about sunlight and a lock. But I'm loving the fact we've got all these set photos in this brilliant reconstruction. This is really eerie, isn't it? They're sort of having to try and affect events from outside of events. Oh, and he sounds so desperate, doesn't he, old Mavic Chen? I know. I'd so love to see all these scenes with with all of the delegates and Marvick Chen. And I did talk, didn't I, about Salation being on Junior Points of View, who was and had to say some funny line. I can't remember what it was now. And Terence Woodfield was known to somebody I know, and I did get his address, I think. Or no, I think she contacted him for me and never heard back for Who's Round. But he did write to a friend of mine or replied, signed photos. And apparently there was the very smell of cigarettes when the envelope was opened. And I believe he was because you sort of go, what did these people do after they stopped acting in the 60s? Although he's the Sawson captain in the Tomorrow People, so end of the 70s. But that's still a long time between then and him dying in whatever it was, 2016. You go, what do these people do? But I believe he was of independent means, so he obviously sat at home smoking a lot of cigarettes. But perhaps that's why Salation talks like that. But this is why I'm fascinated by the people. Do you know what I mean? I would have loved to have, and maybe this friend of ours said, this guy was talking to you. I would want to talk about Doctor Who, but I didn't want to just talk about Doctor Who. I'm really fascinated in the people who've sort of touched our show, even very, very briefly, but theirs is a unique perspective. When the camera started rolling, they were there. They saw all of this stuff not only moving but in colour. And that's the other beauty about the black and white stuff, is that actually, and there's some wonderful work goes online now where people are recoloring or colouring black and white photos, and it just makes it seem like yesterday, and it makes these often very long dead people, and certainly long past situations, seem so vivid and like yesterday. There's actually a guy, who's Doctor Who fan, Babel colour, Stuart Humphreys, who colours stuff from the late 1800s, and you see these sort of children, who look, you can see the hairs on their arms and the freckles on their face. But since that photo was taken, that person who could be in the room next to you has stopped being a child and has grown and aged and past all those landmarks that we pass and live through, joy and happiness and sadness and disappointment and all those things we feel so palpably, and died probably before we were born. And you go, God, that's really weird. And yet they saw things as vividly as we see them now. And that's why I'm very sort of, I don't know, I'm soppy about individual people, I guess. It's probably all narcissism, really. I want to be special too. I don't know. But I would have loved to have chatted to Terence Woodfield, because he is the only person that played Salation in episode 11 of the Daleks Masterplan. And I did say, didn't I, that Ian East, who played Salation in episode 2 of the Daleks Masterplan, and I think he and Terence Woodfield both died on the same day. Which is a really strange coincidence. And Brian Mosley, who plays Malfa in this, I think died outside of Cash Point, didn't he? He was he'd left Coronation Street, but he was a Coronation Street legend. And I'd never, we used to watch Coronation Street back in the day. I never thought that Alf Roberts would have been in Doctor Who, but he'd been a stuntman. I think he's also does some of the sword fighting and stuff in The Smugglers. Smugglers is a story that doesn't have many survivors at all now. But, we're talking a long time ago. I'd have loved to have seen all of this. But, of course, the problem is these pictures look great, don't they? But all it would take is one extra to bump into another, or one slightly ill-fitting costume, or one sort of slightly shambling gait, and they wouldn't have looked. In fact, because I thought the Mission to the Unknown that UCLan did was really, really good and really strong, and I thought they judged the acting really, really well. But actually, the bit I was looking forward to most, which was the delegates, was sort of 5 people shambling on and standing a bit close to each other, and I'm not saying that it was anything unlike it would have been in the in the actual mission to the unknown, I thought maybe they might look better, like a lot of things, because most of the 60s was known to me first in great quality still photographs. And a lot of these things look brilliant. The Sensorites look great in those old black and white, grainy, wonderful pictures. So many black and white photos I saw of the Keys of Marinus in Doctor Who, the early years. Those brilliant Ray Cusick set photographs with the Ford, and they all look fantastic. And then when they start to move, they don't look as good as the still photos. It's a bit like those old Angus MacBain photos of Shakespeare plays on stage. They look so amazing, and actually they probably look better because they're moody and dark and black and white than they would as soon as they get movement and articulation. But that's okay. That's all part of it. I love this whole atmosphere of this abandonment, and it, largely the sort of silent menace of the Daleks, because they're observing them from afar, and of course they're discovering that underground bit. And didn't they? Isn't there something about so Chen's ship has blown up, so that's a nice little faint sleight of hand that we think he's dead. But of course, as I'm sure deep down we know, well, no, he's going to hang around. He's totally lost it now. It's sometimes disappointing when people go mad in Doctor Who, but I think he had to. He's so arrogant. He needs more than toppling from his status. He needs toppling from his self-assurance, and the only way to do that is to sort of fracture his sanity. But isn't there something about, because I'm sure Salation says in episode 8, isn't it? Zephon, isn't it? Zephon in episode 3 goes, Salation and Bass will come with me, and then that's those two delegates that we don't know who they are, extras-wise, MJ Matthews and Jack LaWhite. And it says in the script that the delegates move behind Chen. So that's presumably Salation and Bass going, we're not going with you, Zephon. And I'm sure when the other ship went off, Stephen goes, that's the ship of, or somebody goes, that's the ship of Salation and Bass. And you go, so hang on, because Salation's not in Mission to the Unknown, and Bass is, and now, although we know that they change. So Salation and Bass are kind of like buddies, so they bunk up in the same ship, do they? So what, was Bass there in Mission to the Unknown? And then when it comes to Dalek Masterplan, he goes, I've got my hissy mate made of chocolate buttons. I think he's got a Great Wolf Force too. So I want to know what's going on with Salation and Bass. Everyone else is a representative from their own planet, and Salation and Bass are kind of budded up. What's going on there? I think that needs some exploring in some sort of spin-off. The odd couple, the odd delegates. Anyway, my two delegates. I've got to choose a favourite thing from the abandoned planet. I don't think Ian's going to choose this, but it's what really struck me about that episode is, and I didn't talk about the title of Escape Switch, because I've harped on about the titles on occasion, and Escape Switch is a great title as well, of course, isn't it? Because there's the reason they escape is because they do the switch, the handover of the Terranium. I'm enjoying the episode titles. The Abandoned Planet. The real sense of this whole episode is the abandonment, is the absence of Hartnell, the quiet exit of the Supreme Dalek. Top marks, by the way, for the Supreme Dalek's voice, which is, fingernails on a blackboard. It's horrible. It's screechy as well, but it's screechy without being sort of ludicrous and undermined, because as the Daleks can sometimes be, it's screechy because it's nasty. It's a nasty tone of voice. But I like the eerie sense of abandonment is what I like about the appropriately titled The Abandoned Planet. Let's see what Ian has chosen.
Then we move on to The Abandoned Planet. Now, I'm going to have a change for this particular episode. I love the scene at the beginning where the Doctor thinks that he has got it wrong, and that the directional unit of the monk's TARDIS didn't work, and they were stuck. They hadn't got back to Kemble as they hoped. And then he asks Sarah to put on the scanner screen, and he realized that he is at Kemble. Now, it's interesting that he manages to get back to Kemble at the right time, and I thought that strange at the time. He was very fortunate because he could have ended up in Kemble maybe in a different era, because the TARDIS was never quite in the right era, the right time. But never mind. He got back, and then he makes out that he expected to get back all along. And there was a lovely scene with a comic scene with Sarah and Stephen more or less saying to Sarah, "That's the Doctor. He'll bluster. He'll get things wrong and pretend that he was getting things right all the time. It was just a subterfuge or something like that." It's a lovely character piece, and it's very different from the bulk of that episode, which is quite unsettling in places. And the strange thing is, the Doctor then disappears for the rest of the episode, and Sarah and Stephen have to continue. And that's what is really is like. I like it when there is less Doctor, because often less is more. You can have too much. Doctor can make his mark in a few scenes. He doesn't have to be center stage all the time. And so that's why I like The Abandoned Planet, because it concentrates on the delegates, and it concentrates on Mavic Chen, particularly at the end, when there is the cliffhangers. That episode is great.
Now that is really interesting, and I was banging on through the cliffhanger. It is a great cliffhanger. It really is a sense of, and now I'm going to lead you to the final episode, and it's underground with loads of Daleks in it. I really like that. Yes, that's a really good scene, and I was banging on through it at the beginning. I have to for these things, but I'd actually made a mental note to go, oh, remember, flag up that scene, because it is very funny. It's a moment of great comedy where the Doctor does as Ian described there, and it's a lovely little character moment, and it's a reminder that we're in Doctor Who, and I've been quite hard on Dennis Spooner just because of the contrast of his approach to nations, I guess. But I need to acknowledge that I think, Dennis Spooner is almost the architect of what we imagine Doctor Who to be, because of the way that he, the monk with the toaster, the monk with the wristwatch, in his in the time medley, bringing that sort of contrast, that way of using time travel to. Well, he realises that the TARDIS, the ramshackle 20th century police box, against stunning alien vistas or ancient wonderful monuments, is what the show is. It's that contrast between, and that's part of it being a very British show as well. Our sort of downtrodden, sort of homely, sort of optimistic with not the best means of our disposal. All of that sort of stuff is sort of, I think, exemplified by some of the stuff that Spooner introduces to the show in the 60s, and also his comedy that he brings in as well, because we I don't think we think of Doctor Who without its sense of humour now, but I think he was the person to sort of push it into that direction, particularly, and in a way that works. Much as I love Donald Cotton's stuff, I think his is unsustainable. But the melding that Spooner does is I think how we, the sort of the average the template of the average balance of how Doctor Who tells its stories, and you know, that's a very Dennis Spoonery scene, I think. But I love Ian's chat there about the Doctor being less is more, and the fact that, you know, I there's me just looking at the behind the scenes tragedy of, you know, Hartnell being eased out by a producer that didn't like him, and the fact that as we know, Hartnell has a rather ignominious departure from the show, where he's, you know, very much with a whimper, not with a bang, and you know, it's actually quite obscene how sort of low key his departure is, and how that, you know, it must have been a bit of an anticlimax for him, and the result of a period of the diminution of his role and impact, and seemingly to his bosses his importance to the show. But actually, that Ian seeing it through the child's eyes of going, the Doctor's not in it much because it's mysterious, and, you know, he doesn't come into the first episode for about the first 12 minutes, is it 13? And you know, that's Doctor Who. It makes sense of things like the Christmas Invasion, where, you know, Russell T Davies holds, you know, our 10th Doctor moments till quite near the end, you know, and it is an effective way of doing things. There are first episode. I remember the police series Rockcliffe's Babies with Ian Hogg. Rockcliffe is not in the first episode until the very, very end, and it is a great way to deal with your hero sometimes, and you do feel the Doctor's absence in that episode. So I mean, I could almost claim a bit of a point there, but I'm not going to. But yeah, that idea that less is more, which sometimes I think with the crying and things, and the I'm the Doctor, I'm the most important thing in the universe, and aren't I famous, and all that, could actually be dialed back, and you get more from sort of holding that sort of stuff back, which is very much exemplified by the activities of that episode. What a good episode. I hope Ian Levine gets his wish, and that someone somewhere is able to deliver him, and indeed all of us, The Abandoned Planet, because I think there's plenty to enjoy there, even though the Doctor's not in it much. We feel that absence, and everything else going on is great. Stephen's great, Sarah's great, Mavic Chen's great. Oh, we love the delegates, and I hope they didn't bump into each other and had lovely tight-fitting costumes. Tight-fitting costumes just better than baggy ones, but maybe that's just me. But Salation and Bayes aren't having a party at my house unless everything's just snug. Right, I don't know quite where I'm going with that. Anyway, thanks for coming to my dungeon of fun. I'm going to abandon you all now, and we shall reconvene next time for the final episode of the Daleks Masterplan, which promises the destruction of time. But thanks for listening. Thanks to Ian K McLachlan, who I think is giving a really terrific insight, and don't you just love him, into what it was like watching these things that we see as relics, you know, fresh from a child's eyes, as vivid and colourful as they were when they were first minted. Oh, anyway, bye. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest at the moment is Ian K McLachlan, regaling us with tales of the Daleks Masterplan. I'm grateful to him, as I am to the many patrons that make these podcasts possible, and they include Barry Platt, Darren Mackay, Joe Llewellyn, Ian Key, Siobhan Galichon, Jason Gorman, Paul Dunn, Chris Dunford-Kelk, John Deere, Rob Dawson, Peter Crocker, Richard Chalk, Paul Cook, Paul Carrington, Jenny at Bluebox 99, David, who is anonymous, Nick Tedston, Richard Straw, Stephen Moffat, Rob Leonard, Peter Harness, Peter Burns, Ruben Herfindahl, Paul Dunn, Len Stewart, Stephen Bamford, Rhys Williams, Jason Wilshire Mills, Matt Corner, Mark Martin Cook, Kevin Parker, Kevin Ashelford, Thomas Guerrier. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Oh, well, if you would like to join that illustrious list of patrons, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. You can join for as little as £3 a month. Most goodies are available at the lowest tier. I try to be egalitarian, but I also, waft some little saucy options to the higher tiers, because they obviously have to have some sort of inducement. But also, I don't want to deny anybody the goodies because they're only able to do the lowest tier, which is £3 a month. But you can also actually get a discount on that if you sign up for a year. You get 10% off, and I say the lowest tier. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I am grateful to everybody that signs up, and I think £3 a month is extremely generous of you kind people that throw your hard-earned cash in the direction of basically a yakking Wikipedia entry that's probably just about as reliable as well. Anyway, I'm also grateful to those of you that can't even do that and are just downloading and listening and maybe spreading the word about this. And that's what's absolutely free, to give a 5-star review and some nice lines of review on iTunes or wherever you get this podcast. That would just really help to spread the word. You can also go to kofi.com/Toby Hadoke if you don't want to do the monthly thing of Patreon. And just throw me a donation whenever you fancy, or whenever you're feeling flush, or whenever you take pity on me. But as I say, just listening to this stuff and telling people about this. If you enjoy this stuff, tell your friends, tell social media. I'm very, very grateful. I'm also a working comedian. That's my day job, and I can be seen at Excess Malarkey Comedy Club every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. in Manchester. I MC, introducing at least 4 acts from the national comedy circuit, and at the beginning of every month, that show goes live around the world on the internet at 8 p.m. on the first Sunday of every month on twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey, where we do an online version. Again, it's me and a load of comedians from around the world, just doing a thing and hopefully being entertaining. Join us. I've just been tweaking a couple of an earlier episode of this. I've been adding an I think you'll find where I did a bit of a brain freeze. But you see, the non-patrons, they'll just think it was there all the time. And I've also been I added a couple of paragraphs to the thing about death on Indefinable Magic, just because I thought there was some interesting statistics, basically about the only 2 episodes of Doctor Who that have an entirely living cast, and that is episode 4 of City of Death and episode 1 of Earthshock, which is a sobering statistic. And then there are some, like a couple of episodes of Ambassadors of Death, a couple of episodes of Silurians, maybe only 1 episode of Ambassadors of Death, we're not sure, a couple of Silurians, a couple of Spearhead that have no surviving cast at all. Whereas I'm pleased to tell you that every single cast member of this edition of the Toby Hadoke's Times Travels, I don't even know what it's called, I'm going senile, Happy Times and Places, is still very much alive. Well, I am at the time of recording. If a podcaster dies in a booth and nobody's there to hear him, was he ever really alive? Yeah.